Welcome to the 359. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
I'm Alfred Ng.
Facebook is in trouble again. The company disclosed that user data was being used by Cambridge Analytica, a firm used by the Donald Trump campaign to help target voters. Now, the big question is how the data got transferred from this, I guess, seemingly innocuous app to Cambridge Analytica. Alfred, you're here to break this down. What happened here?
Yeah, so you know those quizzes that you always take on Facebook that's like, oh, here's what your personality is.
I love those quizzes.
Yeah,
they're
so
fun.
that's where all the data came from. So when you sign up for those quizzes, you're basically giving permission to these apps. Like they can see your profile, they can see like your political affiliation, they can see who your friends are and things like that. It happens. That's something that goes across the board for all like third-party apps that are on Facebook.
Right.
And the idea is they're in agreement with Facebook. Like Facebook allows them to exist on their website, but in return, they can't use like this information for any like political purpose or anything like that. You can still use it for like advertising purposes, which is why they make money.
And the app itself, or the site, was like, this is your digital life?
Yeah.
How long are they able to scrape your data? Is it for like a week, or is it you do the app
they
once
have
and
it.
they have it?
Yeah, they pretty much have it, and they usually sell it to advertisers. But in this scenario, they were able to keep it, and then somehow it got to Cambridge Analytica through the person that developed this app, and they used it for political purposes. When Facebook found out, they told them, hey, you have to delete this, and they said they did, and then on Friday they made the announcement, so actually they didn't, and that's why we're banning them for this.
Right. So, I mean, look, we had a bunch of coverage over the weekend. I think the bigger question being asked is Facebook is taking pains to kind of blame this app. They're trying to blame Cambridge Analytica. But ultimately, I think a lot of the debate now is whether or not Facebook is to blame for this, right?
I mean, I would make the argument that they are. The fact that, it was designed in this way that, there's really no check for them to see what they're using that data for in the first place. It's kind of like they're very optimistic about how people are using data like taken off of Facebook. It's like, okay, just don't use this for any like political purposes, or like they don't have any like safety checks or something like that. Like, and it's just like, do you really not think that like, oh, somebody wants to find out what like their personality color is? Like, why would they need to know like my political affiliation for something
who
like
all
that?
my
Or
friends
your
are.
location data. And that was a big thing, right? It wasn't just taking your data, but all of your friends' data.
Yes.
And in total, 50 million users were affected, right?
Yep.
All right, so scary stuff. Next up, Bloomberg has reported that Apple is working on its own micro LED display. Now, micro LED, we saw an example of this at CES with Samsung with the wall, that giant 146-inch foot television.
That doesn't look so micro to me. What makes it
So that's the thing.
LED?
The technology right now is it's really difficult to shrink a lot of that stuff. It's actually why Samsung had this giant wall. They couldn't quite get it down to phone size. And so if Apple is able to actually use this technology and get it down to the size for a phone, that's actually a huge breakthrough. And it could mean that Apple would break its dependence from suppliers like LG and Samsung, which already supply LCD screens as well as OLED screens to iPhones.
Now, according to the report, it's important that you don't hold your breath on this one.
Yep.
It's first expected to show up in wearables and unlikely to reach the iPhone in at least 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges here. To even ramp up production for the iPhone, I mean, it would take years and billions in investment, having a facility to actually make this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also important to remember they did a huge investment in sapphire potential displays, like the display covers, and that never came to fruition. So it's interesting to hear that they're doing this, but there's no telling whether it's actually going to happen.
All right, for more of these stories, check us out at CNET. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
I'm Alfred Ng.
Thanks for listening.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start fishing through the chat to get some more questions and comments to keep the conversation going. In the meantime, how scary is this Facebook stuff?
Yo,
every day, every friggin' day,
it's been
something
a
else
bad-
breaks.
Stop
been a
taking
bad
quizzes
couple
on
months.
Facebook. Stop using third-party apps.
I need to know what kind of smoothie I am.
Yeah,
It's just-
exactly.
I think the problem is that everybody complained about those like BS flashlight apps that all they did was like scrape information off
yeah.
of your
That's
phone.
like
Yeah.
apps though, like from the
Those
App
are-
Store. That's not
yes.
something on Facebook.
Yeah, but that's like this is one thing. It's a flashlight, and then it's stealing all your information, or it's using it regularly. the fact is that those little quizzes, like you maybe you do them for 5 minutes, and the amount of information that they're able to generate, I would say liken it to those flashlight apps. It's a totally unnecessary usage of what it actually should be doing.
Yeah, it's just, and it's hard to like just blame users for that. It's like to say, oh, you shouldn't have used like that app in the
You
first
should
place
have read the
because
fine print.
I mean, but no one reads the fine print.
I still think a lot of this does fall on Facebook in the way that, you know, they wrote like these rules that were like very optimistic about it in a way, whereas basically, hey,
was it optimistic? Was it naive? Maybe
I would say a little bit of both, but it's just, you know,
Negligent
like
is a
people like don't use this for political purposes or don't like leak this, and then if it does get leaked, we really don't have a way to check if it does.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't understand this from Facebook's perspective. I mean, that's kind of like been their MO on a lot of things where when their platform gets abused, it's just we didn't think that it would be used this way.
And I think I mean, you're seeing that's the trend with Facebook and really with most of these Silicon Valley companies. It's like, we'll just put out this service first and we'll figure out like what the consequences are later. And then we'll fix them. We'll patch them.
Nobody will do anything bad with this. Oh, no, somebody did something bad.
But that is part of Silicon Valley culture, right? Just go out and break things, right? That's sort of the idea is like, we need to disrupt. We need to change things around, put out these new services. We'll figure out the consequences. The problem is that these consequences are having massive ramifications with politics, with just the way we live our lives, right? Privacy.
I agree with you on that. It's also important to recognize that Facebook, that's how they make money, is through advertising. They generate a lot of ad dollars by packaging our user data, the data that people readily give over to Facebook, and that in many ways isn't going to change because that's how they continue to exist as a company.
And that's the thing. That's why Facebook has been very hesitant, or actually just complete denial to call it a breach. They're basically saying, this isn't a breach. These people willingly gave up their information to like this third party.
That makes them sound worse, though.
Yeah,
right. It's not a breach. They all did everything legal. Technically, we allow all this stuff. So yeah.
It's interesting that, you know, in something like this, what they're gonna get into like the details on is semantics here, where it's like, hey, that's not what it was.
To be fair, I mean, it was the CTO Stamos that tweeted about this. He did delete I think he realized later on, well, that this makes me sound stupid.
Their marketing officer still his tweets are still up. Something.
Oh really?
Something.
Okay. Yeah.
Do we have questions? Or we can keep going.
No, let's go ahead and
we're all angry
and dive into the chat. I want to first and foremost thank everybody for keeping it civil. I know politics is a hard thing to discuss, especially in the scenario like this. We're just trying to convey information about the research that goes into some of the data that
and make
passes
people
in and
aware
out.
that this is something that was happening on Facebook, which almost everybody uses.
Yeah, so just thank you again for being adults and being mature. And
look,
we're gonna
ultimately, I mean, it's sexier because it's affiliated with Trump, but it's not necessarily about the politics. It's really about the fact that our data was being used by someone.
The thing about this, though, is that had Cambridge Analytica made that quiz on their own,
none
of it would have been like illegal or like stolen by any sense of it.
Right.
Like the only reason why in this scenario it's like so scandalous, I guess, is because it was like from this like group that had nothing to do with Cambridge Analytica, and they just gave it to them.
Yep.
Had they put this quiz out on their own, they could have easily just harvested this information themselves.
Right, but
and
that's
there wouldn't
how
have been
easy
a problem.
that's how easy it is to just harvest the information, and once it's in someone else's hands, who knows what they're going to do with it.
What Alfred just described, that is the bigger problem, right?
Yeah.
The fact that could have happened, that can still happen, and that would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah, like you wouldn't get all this like big buzz about it because like they wouldn't have been suspended. There wouldn't have been like that many issues with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to be fair, in Facebook's defense, they did close that loophole with the friends data. Right?
Yes.
So it was back in 2015, I believe, they closed that loophole in which when you agree to like give up your data, like it's not taking your friends' your network
I
data
do
as
a
well.
quiz, and they can
that's-
take my friends' data.
But
yeah, that's how they were able to get 50 million users. It wasn't just like, it was maybe like whatever.
Because I think they only got like 270,000.
Okay, 270,000 people, but because of their networks, it became 50 million. Scary, right?
Each one of them had a
It just
million.
boggles the mind that was okay, that was considered to be fine.
Right.
And luckily they did close that.
I mean, a lot of it is that they just, I mean, it's Facebook didn't consider the consequences. They didn't consider the ramifications until someone decided to exploit it. That's kind of the issue. That's the bigger issue there.
The exploitation, I think, is the most frightening part, and what is a seemingly an innocent avenue, taking a silly quiz or something like that.
Right.
Nothing is sacred anymore. Your grandma playing Candy Crush is probably compromised at this point.
Candy Crush is okay, I guess. Right?
Nothing is sacred anymore.
I know. I
What the
shouldn't
hell are you
assume
talking
anything.
about?
So anyways, we want to go ahead and touch on the fact that, yes, Imagine Sagi is right. They misused the data. It's not truly a data breach in this case. It is and it isn't.
You can
broad
argue
sense.
it's a data breach, like you said, in a broader sense, because the data was taken and given without permission. Like, they broke rules in giving that data from the
Yeah, I
crazy
would-
app to Cambridge Analytica.
I would classify it as a breach in the same way that like people classify like Edward Snowden's like data as a breach. Like,
Right.
and
It wasn't
he,
like
he
hacked,
worked for them and
but-
he like took it from them and like publicly.
Does that make it more of a breach of trust?
No, I think
No,
it is
it's-
literally.
yeah.
I think it's literally a breach, right? Like it's not like hackers were involved with it. It was just handed
Yeah.
over, but it wasn't intended for this other party.
Yes, I was listening on NPR this morning. Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat from Minnesota, made this point too, where she's saying like, look, if somebody breaks in your house, whether they use like a crowbar to break in or if like the manager gives them a key
Right.
to
It's
get
still
in,
a breach.
it's still like a breach of like somebody getting in. And
Yeah.
like in this scenario, like Facebook essentially gave Cambridge Analytica the key.
Well,
to,
not
like, all-
not Facebook necessarily.
Well, yeah,
This other
yeah,
firm, yeah.
he essentially got a key in, so it's not really, it would still be considered a breach.
We have too much knowledge.
So if you do one of these quizzes, can you remove it afterward?
Yes. So I almost did a story on something like this before with the privacy policy stuff on like these quizzes. You can opt out of it, but it's like, you know how like you had to opt out of like the Equifax like
God, yeah.
yeah, where you had to
It's a
like write a
terrible
letter
process.
to them saying like I choose not
Like
to
a
be a
snail
part of
mail
this.
letter. Yeah.
And then there's like an address and everything. That was one of the ways that I saw to opt out
Wait,
of this
seriously?
data
Like there
collection.
wasn't like an option online to do it? Like you had to like write.
This was
offline?
just for one quiz company that I looked
Oh,
at. So
okay.
It might be different for all of them, but
Got it.
yeah.
That would
So
be
there-
horrible. Like you'd have
so
to
you
write a
can.
letter and like buy a
Don't want it
stamp
to be
and
easy.
put it on the envelope. I don't
They-
even know how to. I don't even know where my
Life
stamps are.
is terrible.
All right, let's go ahead and take some comments and questions from Shinjoy. Having or not having 2FA is not the same issue here. Is not the issue here.
Right.
Users themselves gave profile details to the breach mechanics. This was not a hack.
No, there's not a
Further
hack.
expanding on this idea.
Yeah, you were definitely willing. You willingly gave up your data, and whether or not you actually knew how much data you were giving up is kind of beside
And your
the point.
friend's data.
And your friend's data. So yeah, two-factor authentication would have helped in this particular scenario because your data was given to a party, and the breach isn't with, you giving up your data. The breach came when the data was handed over to another firm that really had no business looking at that data.
So in this case, is ignorance bliss?
No.
No. Ignorance.
now
is
we're not
far
ignorant.
No,
worse.
you should
So-
know more and then not take these quizzes anymore.
One would wonder what it would look like.
Or maybe
if
just stop using Facebook.
Yeah,
at this
Facebook
point. That's
did like
kinda
yeah,
like-
but like what if Facebook just did big disclaimers on this kind of stuff where they specifically
They do
mention-
though.
They do.
They
People
say-
Before
say
you take
if
the
you do
quiz, it
this-
says like you need to give permissions to this, and this.
I haven't done one of those quizzes in a while.
I
so
did
it's
one for
interesting.
my like a story that I was looking at, and it tells you. But like in the same way that when you download an app on like the Google Play Store, like you would probably skip the
yeah,
permissions.
you
page, too.
just
You
just hit
Yeah.
OK
That app.
and rip right through it. Yeah.
It's true.
All right, moving on. From Michael Brown, we got, why do you think people still use products like Facebook despite constant controversial news headlines?
That is a great question.
I think because it's not controversial for them specifically. Like when they see all this stuff about like, oh, this fake news spread on this, or like they put like this like hoax, like conspiracy theory on the top trending topics. The idea is that's not what they're coming like. Like they might not see that on Facebook themselves anyway. So why would
True.
they care about that? And even
a
if
good
they
point.
did, it's just okay, cool. I guess that sucks, but I mean, this doesn't affect how I use Facebook.
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's still the best way to connect with their family and friends, and that network of people that you want to stay in touch
Guilty.
with.
That's what I only ever wanted it for, was to touch base with the people in my life. I don't need it as a news resource. I trust the companies that have credible background, credible information, credibility, period, that have established themselves in the industry as news outlets. Now anybody can tack on news and put a blue check mark next to their name. And yeah, maybe you have an opinion and a platform and something that you can say and should be entitled to say. Does that mean you have any kind of weight to it? Not in the slightest.
I think people, like, when they see headlines like these, assign a lot more personal responsibility on, like, people on Facebook rather than Facebook itself, and the idea that, you know, if I see something like that's like fake news or a propaganda like campaign, it's like, why not just block it like yourself? But I think, you know, the other side of this argument is, you know, Facebook as a company like this should be the ones watching after this and not like me having to do this. You know, Facebook and Twitter have both like come out and said whenever people like call them out on this, they've always said, you know, we have a great user base and they do a great job reporting it to us and we see it that way. But I think I've always been against that in the sense of why don't they just have people watching out themselves and blocking it themselves? So yeah, I see like both sides of the argument. I see why people continue to use it.
Yeah, and they're clearly able to respond to scams and problems like that. We're seeing that right now with the crypto community, where cryptocurrencies, they've just completely removed ads from Facebook and also Google. The problem is that cryptocurrency companies and exchanges, whether they're legitimate or not, I mean, there are a lot of scams, but there are also a lot of legitimate companies that are trying to make that into a thing. They're now all just getting like thrown out together. So when they do make these blanket efforts, sometimes those can cause problems too.
I just want to see more accountability. There's entirely too easy on every platform out there to be invisible, to be a ghost. The fact that no one is held accountable for their actions is the damaging thing here, I think.
Right. I mean, I think we'd all like to see Zuckerberg and, you know, Larry Page or, you know, any one of these executives actually go up to Congress and talk to them rather than, you know, have their attorneys.
Yeah, I've said this on previous like podcasts, and every time a story like this happens again, I think it's gonna come sooner and sooner. But like the question of like, will we live to see the day that like Facebook dies out, like, or goes the route of like MySpace and Yahoo, where it doesn't die but it's there and no one uses it?
Right.
Yeah, every time a story like this happens, I think more and more like, yeah, like that'll probably happen like pretty soon.
Their business right now is doing phenomenally well, and if anything, they're continuing to get more users. So I think that if that were to happen, it would take a while. The other big question,
I don't think it'll happen like in the next like 2-3 years, but I think I will live to see a day where it does happen.
That would be interesting to see. The other thing that a lot of times gets mentioned is the idea of regulation too. Is that our regulators going to start getting involved more to try to police what actually goes on these platforms?
I think we're definitely going to see that, right? We're seeing that now. There's increased interest with regulators, with government, whether it's here, whether it's in the EU, to start cracking down on these companies, right? They've kind of lost their shine a bit as these tech darlings. So,
folks just need to start doing their homework. Stop treating Facebook as a news resource. The water cooler gossip you get at work isn't news; it's gossip. We only have a few minutes left, so let's get through a couple of really good questions. From Channing Che, is Facebook less safe than other social media, or is it just targeted more? I don't see how not using Facebook will help that very much. That's a great question. Just like people say, oh, well, I got a Mac, so I can't get a virus. No, they just didn't make as many viruses for Macs because there were more PCs.
Right.
I think it's kind of falling along the same lines.
Yeah, I mean, look, Twitter's just as bad, I would argue.
Oh, yeah.
Facebook. So
it's all a
cesspool.
cesspool.
It's not just Facebook. I mean,
yeah, but there's less data on you on Twitter. Like it doesn't have.
Sure,
like,
but in terms of
they
like,
don't care as
but
much.
in
you
terms
don't
of
have like your likes on.
But
your,
in terms of like influences, whether you know that's why Russia targeted Twitter as well, right?
yeah.
So I mean, I feel like it's just as toxic environment. I don't know,
but I mean, I think in this scenario though of like data mining and like for political campaign purposes,
right.
I think Facebook is a lot like more potent than like Twitter is.
Okay.
Right, because
Fair
more
enough,
of your profile is
Yeah,
on there.
yeah, like so much of your profile.
So
is on there.
we should all jump on Snapchat.
Yeah, actually, yes. Any social media that really doesn't like last forever it's
actually by definition like much safer.
Yeah, that's like that's what a lot of like Gen Z like kids are doing now. That's why they're moving on from like Facebook. That's why they have like Finstagrams where it's like you don't know that it's really them,
right,
or anything like that. And like Snapchat where like things don't last that long.
Should we go back to MySpace?
There's all these articles
one's
like
hacking MySpace
now about like, oh, Snapchat is dying and like Snapchat is irrelevant, but it's like, yeah, to like you and your friends, like people who write these articles, sure, but like among like young kids, like Snapchat is still like the go-to like app. Like when they had the school walkout stuff,
Yeah.
all of that activity on social media was going on Snapchat. Like if you look at like the heat map stuff or like Snap Maps, there was nothing on that on like Instagram stories. And like people talk about, oh, Instagram stories is like killing Snapchat. Like that's not true at all.
For specific generational.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because I think I agree with you that I do see those headlines where it's just talking about Snapchat's irrelevance. So yeah. But yeah, that definitely provides a useful answer to the question.
And I think like
as what would be a better social media, it's the ones that delete your information after a while and don't just keep it for decades.
Yeah, and I think like younger generations are recognizing that, and they don't want to be a part of this, like massive like collection network or anything like that. And it's just, yeah, the kids are cool. Listen to the kids, man.
All right, we are just at the end of it, and I just kind of like this closing thought as phrased by Mike Shaw and shared by several people in the chat. The root of the problem is our data. Google, Facebook, third-party apps, your grocery store, loyalty card, they're all tracking you. Maybe we need better laws so we can have control over our own data. And I think that kind of goes without saying, but how the hell are we going to accomplish this? There is just a... Well, go ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the EU has been doing that with GDPR. It's not off the top of my head what it stands for right now. I'm very sorry about that. But the crux of it is more about, better data privacy where like companies have to disclose breaches within like a shorter time period. They're fined like heavily if they don't. The EU has already like set forward like laws on that. It's like going into action now, but I don't know anything in the U.S. about it. So.
No, good points all around. Another great comment from Jesse Gademan. What happens when those small social media companies fail and liquidate all your data gets sold off? Anyways, these are all things that we're going to have to constantly think of. There's just a great conversation drumming up now. We never got back to the Apple
it's fine. This
screens,
is an important topic to talk about.
It was, and thank you, everybody. That was a very good, mature, interesting discussion.
Yep.
And it was nice to not see it go down the typical political rabbit hole. So props to, as always, to the 359 listeners, and we gotta go.
We gotta go. Sorry. If you liked anything you saw or heard here, check us out on CNET. Our podcast is available on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Feedburner, Google Play Music, and the Amazon Echo.
I'm Alfred Ing.
That's great.
Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Bye, all.